air separation plant cooling towers being removed, bridge crane trolleys on site, and blacktop at the launch site? Are you kidding me? Hey everyone, welcome to this week's action-packed RGV aerial photography Starbase flyover update. I'm Indnstar, and I'm excited to share some of the amazing things happening at SpaceX development facility referred to as Starbase. I'm also excited to announce that we, the RGV production team, are working on a very special episode that is sure to make you nostalgic. It releases next week, so be on the lookout for upcoming updates. Now buckle up and let's get started. Alright, let's begin as we usually do here at Massey's structural test site, used by SpaceX to test newly built boosters and ships prior to engine installation, and experiment with test articles. As always, a big shout out to Procky for creating and keeping these awesome labeled maps up to date. Thanks, Procky. Now, let's look at Massey's images from a previous flyover and the one from last Friday using the comparison slider. In this image, we can see what Massey's looked like the week before last, on Wednesday, September 27th, compared to the most recent flyover photo taken on October 6th. As we slide over the image, check out all the differences that happened at Massey's in just 9 days. Can you spot all the changes? In the upper right corner of this image, next to the section of Massey's closest to the Rio Grande River, earthwork continues near and around the water treatment area. Though a little difficult to notice at first, fencing surrounding the water storage tanks and encompassing this gravel lot was removed. It's not clear what's in store for this location, but a lot of inventory has been cleared in recent weeks to make way for whatever may be on the horizon. To the left of this area, where we've typically seen SpaceX conduct tests to failure, we have the burst pad. Zooming in a bit closer, we can see what's left of S26.1's remains as crews continue to work to scrap the remnants. Making our way down towards the entrance of Massey's, we can see both thick and thin steel beams erected in various spots across the concrete slab. And from this vantage point, it looks like the work is progressing nicely for what is believed to be a new building with office space for staff working at Massey's. First spotted in our last episode, but only visible in the ground photos, we finally have an aerial view of the building's skeletal framework starting to take shape. As we head over toward the structural verification trial area for test articles, we can see our first aerial view of test article S24.2 since it arrived at Massey's on September 28th. We went into detail regarding the purpose of this test article in our last episode, but to recap, this article is critical in determining the structural integrity of the payload bay, and more importantly, the Starlink PEZ dispenser that sits inside the bay on ships. Seen in this ground photo, hydraulic rams, attached at the top and bottom of the test cage, are connected to the top of the test article and will test the integrity of the payload bay by simulating torsional stress anticipated during the flight profile of Starship. In addition to the torsional stress, these hydraulic rams will also likely simulate compressive forces, testing the reinforcements around the payload bay door, as engineers work to redistribute the forces across the wide opening of the ship. We suspect straps will be connected to these hydraulic rams at the base of the test cage and routed around the holes near the top of S24.2, applying compressive forces as the straps pull down on the test article. Now, if you want to see something really cool, check out these renders created by the space engineers showing the different loads being applied to S24.2 once inside the test cage. These renders display torsional and compressive forces, respectively. If we want to see SpaceX pumping out Starlinks from the PEZ dispenser within a year, as Elon expressed in his most recent talk at the 2023 International Astronautical Congress, or IASC, it's imperative that the test article S24.2 completed structural testing without failure, as depicted here. Next, test article S24.2 in the test cage currently sits S27's aft section, which arrived at Massey's last week. There haven't been any physical signs of testing being performed on this piece just yet, but fear not, because we're keeping a close eye on it and we'll report back when changes occur. We'll round out our Massey's trip with this shot of S29 sitting atop the puckchucker stand. S29 saw yet another cryo-proof test on October 4th, bringing the total number of cryo tests of S29 to 3. As such, it is likely that S29 will be the ship next in line to receive engines. That'll do it for Massey's, so let's head over to Sanchez to check out the progress that occurred over the past week. Welcome to Sanchez, where both a rocket garden and lots of Starbase inventory reside. To reacquaint you with this area, let's review this map of Sanchez to help you identify the different areas at this site. Now that you're reacquainted with Sanchez again, let's compare this photo from the flyover 2 weeks ago on Wednesday, September 27th, with this aerial photo taken last Friday, October 6th. As we move the slider, we can see all the changes that took place in the 2+ weeks in between. Looking down in this image into the ground fabrication building, we can see that construction of the exterior wall is progressing along nicely, as workers continue to hang the insulated exterior panels one wall at a time. Just to the left of this building, we can see a few shipping containers arranged to form a windbreak for any outside work that may occur on the new concrete pad. I wouldn't be surprised if we end up seeing a tent here in future flyovers, obstructing our view of the work being done. You know how SpaceX can be, always hiding that good stuff from us, huh? Shifting over to the stand construction area, the two black stands haven't changed much since we saw them last week, but we can see that a fresh coat of paint has been applied to the recently constructed white stand. Just next to it, we can see the skeletal structure of the platform we expect to be mated with the white stand as it nears completion. The tight network of brown steel supports that look like a spiderweb will soon be covered with a skin, allowing crews to work on top of it. Directly above the stand area, in the scrapyard, we can see a host of new items waiting for their chance to meet the dreaded cutting torch. From left to right, we can see an old nose cone from the build site, an old booster aft section, and the booster transport stand that arrived from Florida ages ago. And though it never got any use, it makes sense that it now sits in the scrapyard, as today's transport stand design is very different from the original transport stand design, which is now totally out of date. In addition to this trio to be scrapped, we can see a different booster stand nearby as well. This is the old booster stand which moved from the old tracking station area to Sanchez a few weeks back. Could this stand be on the chopping block as well? Guess we'll just have to wait and see. Remember that new concrete pad that was poured in this location a few weeks ago? That pad is now occupied by 4 open tanks. And from this angle, we get a better glimpse of these tanks. And given that this location is used for water-related processes, I'm speculating these new features could possibly be part of a future water treatment setup. What do you think these tanks are for? Let me know in the comments below. Shifting over to the air separation plant and the area surrounding it, we can see much of the supporting equipment that was either in use or still pending installation have been moved en masse. A total of 12 cooling towers have been removed in the 9 days since our last flyover, including the ring that pooled and contained the cryogenic liquids as they boiled off. If we look back at this earlier image, you can actually see the crane being connected to the final cooling tower, where it will be lifted and placed on the nearby flatbed trailer and removed. So what does this mean for the future of the air separation plant? With the recent addition of 3-phase power at Starbase, expectations were high for increased production of liquid oxygen, liquid nitrogen, and liquid argon to reduce the dependency on outside resources. However, removing this critical infrastructure indicates that our expected outcome may not come to fruition. It does beg the question, though, is SpaceX abandoning the separation plant altogether? Or could they just be preparing for something bigger and better? Feel free to share your thoughts in the comments below, because inquiring minds want to know. Below and slightly to the right of the newly constructed water storage tanks in this image, we see that the massive cleanup effort happening all over Starbase landed here too, as all the storage containers and the inventory that previously occupied this space were cleared and are all now gone. As for the equipment that remains, we can see that these 2 tanks that were once horizontal are now standing vertically on the newly poured concrete pad. As we move our gaze up towards the mudflat side of Sanchez, we see majestic ship S28 still on the engine installation stand, where it doesn't appear too much has changed. As mentioned in our last episode, a transport stand was spotted nearby, possibly indicating that the removal of the ship was imminent. But as seen in these recent flyover images, that stand has since been moved further away from S28 and closer to the rocket garden. Plus, those telltale SPMTs used to transport different Starship and booster artifacts are nowhere to be found. While not much has changed visually for this ship, we anticipate S28's time on the engine installation stand is quickly coming to an end. Where will it go, you ask? Well, expect S28 to be placed in the rocket garden, where it will receive its finishing touches. Additionally, the return of S29 back from Massey's could occur at any time within the next week. There's even a road closure in place for Monday, October 9th, with backup days on October 10th and 11th. Who knows what the coming week will hold for these two ships, but we do know that Ship 28 better watch its back. Now, let's round out this week's tour of Sanchez with a look at what's in the rocket garden. Here we see the booster puckshucker stand parked next to the weathered booster 4. This stand made its way back to the site from Massey's in the early morning hours of September 30th. Inside the stand sits 13 hydraulic rams used to push and pull on booster's thrust puck, specifically where the 13 center engines would be mounted, simulating the immense force imparted on the structure during liftoff and in flight. This stand is likely awaiting the call to transport B-11 from Mega Bay 1 to Massey's, where Booster 11 will then receive its first round of cryogenic proof testing. That'll do it for Sanchez. Let's see what's happening at the build site. Do you know where starships are made? If you answered the build site, you are correct. Here's a labeled map of the site to help you familiarize yourself with the various construction facilities. Before we check out this week's progress, let's compare this photo from the flyover on Wednesday, September 27th, with this photo taken late last week on Friday, October 6th. Zooming into the bottom, we notice that cladding installation along the sides of Mega Bay 2 is almost complete, at what seems like breakneck speeds by this yellow crane staged right next to the new Mega Bay's vertical elevator shafts. And here's a nugget of information for you may not know. SN15's forward flaps are sitting over here on the flap rack in front of Tent 4. Normally, forward flaps placed here would indicate that they would be used in the future, on the next ship under construction. But SN15's design is so out of date, it'd be a surprise to see SpaceX reuse them. It's possible that their placement is just to make space in the rocket garden. And thanks to Jax of the Ring Watchers for discovering these flaps. Turning around, we see that both bridge crane trolleys were delivered to the ring yard. Arriving on October 4th, these trolleys are responsible for lifting the booster segments and moving them along the length of the bay. The beams that these trolleys will ride on are seen staged just above them in this image and are still waiting to be installed. If you watched last week's episode, you may have noticed that B-13's 4-ring LOX tank is no longer in front of Mega Bay 1, as it moved inside on September 28th. Then shortly thereafter it was stacked onto Booster 13, as seen here in this ground photo. A completed Ship 30 can also be seen on the right side of the high bay, but we'll talk about this ship a little later. Before we move on, I'd also like to point out that B-13's liquid methane downcomber was installed on October 3rd, as seen in this photo taken by our friends at Lab Padre. Sticking with the ground photos, we can see Booster 11 peeking out from the right side of Mega Bay 1 in this image as it awaits cryo testing. Though not visible, B-10 is still in Mega Bay 1 undergoing engine installation. Returning to the air, we see Ship 31 on the left side of the high bay. The newest starship in the fleet, S31, was fully stacked on October 3rd when it was lifted onto its thrust section a little more than a month after it began stacking. Next, let's talk about Star Factory and its massive expansion. Whoa, did you see that Cybertruck in the video? Looking at Star Factory's expansion, we notice more trenches have been dug and conduit laid. And if you haven't noticed, more trenches and conduit means we can expect concrete footings to be poured in the coming weeks, followed by a concrete pile cap constructed on top to distribute the weight across all the footings. And finally, steel pillars being raised. We can see an example of steel pillars being raised here, in this taller section of the Star Factory expansion extending towards Highway 4. Better seen in the ground shot, we see the stepladder formation of steel pillars as they get progressively taller. You could perhaps call it a stairway to heaven, with heaven being the launch site almost directly across from the Star Factory. Now that's a stairway to heaven I'd like to be a part of. And check this out, the lights are on inside the Star Factory. Never seen that before. Here in the village, we see plots of land being raised with layers of dirt, indicating that expansion is underway for new homes thought to be for SpaceX staff members. Last week, we saw pipe being laid in the middle of this road, potentially used for stormwater drainage after a heavy rainstorm. Over here, the dirt work continues, possibly in preparation for a future parking lot. If you're enjoying this flyover video, then please consider supporting us by liking it and subscribing to our YouTube channel. And join us in Discord to chat with like-minded space enthusiasts like you. The link is in the description. Now, onto the launch site. Let's get started by taking a look at this map to familiarize yourself with the different sections of the site. Now, let's compare images from 2 weeks ago and last week's flyover to see the differences. Here's a photo of the launch site from the flyover on Wednesday, September 27th. Moving the slider over, we can see changes from the flyover that took place on Friday, October 26th. Now, let's take a look at the suborbital side to keep with tradition. What's in the... Wait, is that asphalt? Your eyes do not deceive you, ladies and gentlemen. Asphalt has been poured at the launch site instead of concrete. If we zoom in to take a closer look, we can see the paver used to distribute the material and the rollers working to smooth it over. Why on earth would SpaceX want blacktop near the launch site? Asphalt is a weak supporting material in comparison to concrete, especially in the presence of heat. Leave a heavy object without evenly distributing the load in the sweltering Texas summer heat, and you'll come back to find your smooth pavement now has some divots in it. One of the only reasonable explanations is employee parking. Employees and visitors parking across from the site on State Highway 4 has been the norm for years now, but Cameron County is not a fan of this for safety reasons. It's a busy area with tourists trying to get to the beach and contractors for SpaceX employees constantly moving in and out of the launch site. And don't forget the trucks. Don't be surprised to see lane stripping for parking spots here in a few weeks. On the left side of the lot, we can see what looks to be concrete bases for lampposts, potentially. While a parking lot is quite the underwhelming outcome for this area in comparison to some of the other theories that we were floating around, such as booster static fires or even a pad C, at least we can put this one to bed now. Oh, and what about those trenches we saw dug here before all of the material was added? That remains a mystery unless we see some drain cutouts in the next few flyovers. Over on pad B, S26 sits untethered and the LR 11000 crane has been moved over to the OLM for what could be the beginning of this unique ship's verification testing. This means that work on the side of S26 may have been completed, as SpaceX workers can't go inside the tanks of the ship when it's not tethered to the crane for safety reasons. So why is SpaceX making the decision to go ahead with testing S26 and not waiting for the more advanced, not to mention tiled, S28? Should IFT-2 meet the same ending as IFT-1, there would be no need to move on to the more advanced ship until SpaceX figures out the booster stage of flight. And therefore, S26 would serve as a kind of mass simulator for Booster 10's new and improved design, should it be required. This is, of course, all speculation, and Ship 26 may very well fly even if IFT-2 is a great success. All we know is, in the lull between flight readiness and FAA approval, SpaceX probably wants to line up as many ships and boosters as possible. To add to that, some 12-hour testing closures for the launch site were posted for October 9th, 10th, and 11th on Wednesday, October 4th. The closure for the 9th was later changed to scheduled status the next day, October 5th. How can we be sure this is for Ship 26 and not the full stack over on the orbital side? Well, more on that later. A spin prime may be in the cards for this first closure, but SpaceX may roll the dice and go straight for a static fire. That would be amazing. Though the latter is unlikely, it's not out of the realm of possibility they could do both within the same closure window. A spin prime and then a static fire would be amazing! Not much change can be seen from the air over the Deluge tank farm, but if we switch to this ground image captured from the main entrance over on Highway 4, we can see what looks like safety devices have been added to the individual high-pressure gas tank supply lines. The netting around each pipe, as well as the latches connecting them to the main riser pipe, lead us to believe that these are for containment in the event the pipe were to rupture and scatter shrapnel everywhere. Shrapnel could impact surrounding infrastructure and cause even more damage. Outside of this discovery, however, it appears not much else has changed. The surrounding tanks remain unconnected from the rest of the setup still. Looking down at the tank farm expansion lot from the air again, the cutout we spotted in the last flyover looks quite a bit different. Once rebar was placed in the trench, it looks like the majority of it was covered with concrete, except for this narrow little strip that was left open for future work. What looks to be plywood has been laid down the length of the strip, likely for worker safety. It still isn't clear what this will be, but the possibility of a protective wall being built is still very much alive, considering the narrow strip is directly in line with the existing wall, just next door to where the current methane tanks reside. Before we switch angles to look at the orbital tank farm from Highway 4, take a look at the tank shell surrounding the water storage tank on the left here. Crews were back this week to add some vertical stiffeners to the beaten and battered shell. prior to this, all that was present were horizontal stiffeners. Shifting over to the view from the north, overlooking the orbital tank farm, we can see work continues for plumbing the newly installed subcoolers on the liquid methane processing side, with additional plumbing delivered from the build site. Over on the lock side, we can see the last 2 manifolds have arrived on site for installation on these 2 subcoolers. These manifolds will complete the inlet and outlet sides of all subcoolers for locks, with the tie-ins to the primary supply lines being the only thing left to be completed. The latter is true for the LN2 side as well. Meanwhile, we can see some action starting up again on the 2 motors installed several weeks ago. Scaffolding has been erected for what is likely electrical tie-ins on each motor. The more time that passes waiting for the launch license, the more likely it seems SpaceX may proceed with incorporating these additions to the tank farm into the process for flight number 2. So remember how sure we were it seemed that the upcoming testing would be for Ship 26? Aside from the crane disconnecting and moving away, there's also been another destack of Ship 25 and B9. That's right, it turns out the stacking we saw take place in our last flyover was short-lived, unfortunately. Seen here in this video from RGV Dune Cam, Ship 25 was removed from B9 in the morning hours of Thursday, October 5th. Why would they stack the ship on top of the booster again? Only to remove it a week later without performing any testing on the full stack? If you haven't been following SpaceX for very long, this may come as a surprise to you. So you better buckle up, because these head scratchers take place more often than you might think. Oh, and by the way, scaffolding is back again on the OLM for access to the booster LOX tank hatch. This may be the explanation for SpaceX stacking the ship for that short period though. This may be purely coincidence, but if you remember the Tesla truck we spotted back at the build site, that wasn't the only sighting. Check out these amazing images captured by Starbase surfer on X. The day before Ship 25 was removed from the booster, that same Cybertruck was spotted roaming the launch site with a fully built Raptor vacuum engine in tow. That wasn't all though. A Tesla car, outfitted with camera equipment, was also seen with the pair capturing footage as they drove around the OLM and up and down Highway 4. If you like these photos and are interested to see more about Starbase, be sure to follow and like Starbase Surfer on X. We've included a link to his X account and Patreon account in the description below, so be sure to check them out. Using their Rover 2 cam, our friends at La Padre also caught this great footage of the truck and engine duo as it left the launch site around sunset. What better pairing than a futuristic truck with a futuristic rocket? I can't think of one, can you? Well, that's it for episode 20. I hope you've enjoyed this week's Starbase Flyover update presented by RGV Aerial Photography. If you're interested in Starbase and want to support our weekly flyovers, please consider subscribing to a tiered membership level on either Patreon or YouTube. Once subscribed, you'll get access to our exclusive flyover gallery, access to the first look at both aerial and ground photos taken the same day, and other really cool perks. We also offer RGV Aerial Photography merchandise including shirts, hats, mugs, and various accessories. There are some really cool designs that make for unique and memorable birthday and Christmas gifts. Simply click the RGV merch link from the description below to get access today. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you'll join me in the next video as we review Starbase changes captured by RGV Aerial Photography and wait for the next integrated flight test with bated breath. See you soon!